Hi, I'm Len Epp from Leanpub, and in this episode of the Leanpub Podcast, I'll be interviewing Daniel Vaughan. Based between London and Cambridge, Dan helps organizations understand and navigate the future of work, specifically how agentic AI is fundamentally transforming software engineering. You can follow him on Twitter at Daniel Vaughan and check out his website at danielvaughan.com. Dan is the author of the Leanpub book, Codex CLI, Agentic Engineering from First Principles. In this really excellent book, Dan provides the definitive guide to agentic software engineering with Codex CLI, from prompting fundamentals to multi-agent orchestration, CI/CD integration, and enterprise deployment across 32 hands-on chapters that are constantly being updated, something we'll talk about later. So in this interview, we're going to talk about Dan's background and career, professional interests, his book, and at the end, we'll talk about his experience as a writer of a few books. So thank you very much, Dan, for being on the Leanpub podcast.
Thank you. That's great. Great to be here.
Thanks. I always like to start these interviews by asking people for their origin story. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about where you grew up and what you studied at university and how you made it into the career that you've built for yourself over the years.
Okay, that makes sense. So I grew up in Exmouth in Devon, in the southwest of the UK, by the sea. Um, I I sort of got into programming at quite an early age. We had BBCB computers at school. My dad was a teacher, and he used to bring one home in the holidays. So when I was like, don't know, seven or eight, so I sort of kept that going. And when it came time to go to university, I wanted to do things with computers, but I was also very interested in business and the way businesses work and the systems. So I did computer science and management science. And since then, I've probably been working mainly in software development for about 25 years. 25 years now. I did mostly software engineering, architecture, and then leading teams and leading leading larger groups of people. So I currently work in AI labs at HCL Tech, and I lead the architects in Europe.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you do for HCL Tech and who they are. I mean, I know they're a huge company, but they're one of those huge companies a lot of people have never heard of. So what does HCL Tech do?
That's right. It is a huge company. It's about 225,000 people now. Yeah, and it's an IT services company, and it's probably it probably works with about 50% of the biggest enterprises in the world. You don't hear an awful lot about them. It does everything in IT, from making hardware, making chips, running data centers, running data centers, IT operations, software products, software development. So it covers the whole stack, end to end of IT, which is something you can only really do when you've got a company that big.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so you're working on, AI labs there for that. So like does your work kind of like learn from and touch upon the work that half the companies in the world are doing?
Yes, that's right. I think that's what I find really interesting being in AI labs. We have obviously you get to talk to an awful lot of customers at different companies and see what they're up to. We have a lot of ecosystem partnerships. So we have, for example, a partnership with OpenAI. So we see what the partners are doing and what they're seeing happening in the industry. I'm very active sort of in the local community, technical community in London. So that's another perspective. And then, we're a big company in ourselves with a lot of things going on. So yeah, I feel I'm sort of at this point where all this information is coming from all directions. It's sort of my job to make make sense of it all. You have a perspective of what's happening in the industry.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And one of the reasons I was really looking forward to this conversation, and in particular, so happy when I saw your book show up. Um, so before we move on, I've got a couple of kind of more personal questions to ask to get through before we talk about your book. The first is, longtime listeners to the podcast know that I used to live in London for a few years. So whenever a guest is near or from London, I like to ask them where they live. But in your case, it's where do you work in London?
Okay, I work in the office is in Gracechurch Street, which is in the middle of the city of London. I'm very near the Bank of England, and sort of the office is in between Lloyd's of London and the let me see, the walkie-talkie building, which is one of the landmark buildings. So right in the centre.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I used to work on One Ropemaker Street, which is right in the middle there as well. Yeah, so I used to walk into the city every day, so I know a little bit about what that's like. Cool, that's great. And the second thing is, so I see from your LinkedIn that you studied software. Well, you studied computer science and at university years ago. And one of the questions that sometimes comes up on this podcast, because so many of the guests are people who've studied computer science in the past, is if you were starting out now with the intention, and I know this is different because of the context, this very specific context of what we're talking about. But if you were starting out now with the intention of having a career in IT, like the one you've had, would you do a 4-year formal computer science degree?
I think the challenge at the moment is things are changing so quickly, and that's always been the same. Things have always been changing quickly, but it's just got more and more. And I'm sort of experiencing myself. The amount of learning I'm doing at the moment is certainly the most I've done in my career. And I think every week I find myself in a position that I think I look at myself from last week and think, oh, I can't believe I didn't know about that. I was very ignorant there when I learned something. And I know that next week I will be doing exactly the same thing, looking at myself today. So it's just this constant stream of learning. I think I used to think a few years back, I thought there's about a half-life of your skills of about 2 years where you need to relearn half the stuff you know. I don't know what that is now, but it's certainly a lot shorter. What's changed a lot is the knowledge of individual programming languages or frameworks or technologies is a lot less important because they are changing so quickly. But the fundamentals are still really important, if not more so, especially in software development. Having good software engineering practices, is vital now, because AI, especially with AI is essentially a multiplier of whatever you're doing. So if you're doing it badly, you will get a lot more bad stuff. If you're doing it well, it will multiply that. So the sort of fundamentals you learn in the computer science degree are still very good. I think there had been a sort of shift in computer science to teaching people programming in specific languages and how to be sort of job ready for particular companies. And I think that's sort of got people to be quite narrow in their skill sets. And I think now having the broad base that you have from a wider computer science degree is still very useful.
Yeah, thanks very much. That's a very good answer. I really love how you talk about so vividly about how much you're learning nowadays too. I mean, that makes me
Yeah.
feel a little bit better because I feel the same way, and I didn't study computer science, and I'm not a programmer, although I am kind of now, and we can maybe talk a little bit about that later because I think I'm kind of representative of a lot of people in my kind of position. But so anyway, so thank you very much for sharing that. And now just moving on to the next part of the interview where we talk about your book. Um, so uh, can you talk a little bit about what the inspiration was for you to write this book?
Okay. So the book's about Codex CLI. So Codex is a suite of tools from OpenAI for mainly for software engineering. So very similar to Claude Code, Gemini CLI, or um, one of the IDEs like something like Cursor or Windsurf. It's that idea of agentic coding, but at the command line. Um, we use it we use it extensively on my team. But like everything, it is literally changing every day. There is a release at the moment. If not every day, every couple of days, new features. It's it's very powerful, comprehensive, but it's very difficult to um, to keep up.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, so let's maybe talk about this from the perspective of let's say someone who's just on the street and they've sort of they're not into computers and IT and programming and stuff like that, but they've heard oh these AI kind of tools are totally changing um things. So let's sort of start there. So um does the AI know the code base? Would be my first question.
No, your code base. It doesn't. It knows nothing about your code base to start with. You have to tell
Right.
you have to show it, or you have to tell it.
Right. Okay. And then once I've connected my code base to the tool, um, can basically all, like let's say I've got 100,000 lines of code, can that all fit in the context window of what it understands? Or no?
Yeah. So okay. So 100,000 lines of code could, yeah, you're getting towards the size of the context window. You could, but you probably wouldn't want to do you won't want to do that, because you would start. It's like filling your brain with too much information. It's
Okay.
it's very difficult to concentrate. It's very difficult to concentrate um, anymore and sort things out. So you want to um, just point it at the right part of the code base that you want to work on. So it's like a person. 100,000 lines is code base is quite a lot for an individual to understand. But if you've got the right sort of documentation and your code is well structured, you can start yeah, you can start making sense of it. So the better your code base is structured for a human to understand, the better an agent like Codex will understand your code base as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very good answer. The next question I guess I have is like, let's say someone's uh, let's say I'm running a relatively simple website. I've got a small business, I've got a website, and now I've kind of managed to hook up Codex to my code, and someone's taught me about a command line interface, and I'm sort of now comfortable using terminal, and maybe I've even paid someone to set me up or something like that. Do I need to know anything about coding to be able to use Codex in that context to say make a new web page? And I can say, oh, I want my picture up on the top right, and I want the picture of my office building up on the top left, and then I want a sign up
Oh,
form for my MailChimp newsletter and stuff like that. Do I need to and I mean this in a kind of a deep way, like, will I ever need to understand anything about coding, or can I really just kind of talk to it?
You can. I think the Codex CLI tool itself might be a bit low level for that. But what OpenAI is doing, Codex is like a more of a suite of products now with a common server, and there are sort of higher higher level tools coming out, like the Codex desktop application, which lets you work in a more sort of in sort of a more graphical interface rather than going down to that command line. So in that case, the website would probably be better better managed for a tool like that. But it's all using the same technologies under the hood, if you like. It's just a different surface which you're communicating with.
Okay. It's one really interesting and great part of the beginning of your book is you talk about the progression of kind of technologies along these lines over time and how they relate to each other, like autocomplete, for example. And that leads me to ask, so another thing a kind of, person on the street might have heard about these AIs is that they just predict the next letter. And they large language models kind of look at like they're trained on big sets of words and things like that, or in this case maybe code, and they're just predicting the next letter. Is that even just as a sort of basic way of understanding, is that true, or are there concepts built into, say, tools like Codex where it kind of knows I'm looking at code, not novel, or something like that?
Yes. Okay. I think there's a couple of things there. Yes, it is. Well, it's not. It is predicting. It's specifically predicting the next word rather than letter. But that's and I think people underestimate how powerful that concept is alone. So if I'm talking to you like I am now, I'm effectively predicting the next word to say, and it's not actually doing. I don't think it's actually doing. I'm actually doing a lot more than that. To be honest, the power of something like Codex, as opposed to sort of one of the earlier tools like ChatGPT or something like that, is three things really. One, it's agentic, which means it's running in a loop. So you give it a task and it keeps working until it's got to it's achieved the goal of the task. So it works sort of semi-autonomously. And so it's working that route, it's checking its work until it achieves the goal. And to do that, it has two things. So one, it pulls in context, it pulls in so pulling in information. For example, if you're using a code repository, it would pull in other code. It might pull in things like requirements or technical designs or reference architectures to help it. So it's like giving it like a book to refer to, for instance, to help it do its work, or a documented process to do its work if you were a human. And it's also got, and I think the other big difference is it's also got access to tools. So it's not limited to just generating the next word. It can call tools. So those might be something simple like reading a file from the disk, writing to a file, executing a command line command, going and searching the web, or writing some code, writing a tool writing its own tools. And because it knows what knowledge it's got, it knows what tools it's got access to, and it's just trying to achieve that goal. It will make it agentic in that it will make the decision of how best to achieve the goal based on the knowledge and the tools it has access to.
Thanks very much for that.
Different from what earlier. Sorry.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for that. You answered a question before I got to ask it, which is what agent or agentic means in this context.
Okay.
And and it's funny, it's kind of like again, when you're sort of so deep into these kinds of things, you can kind of, it's sort of easy for people like us to sort of miss what it looks like from the outside. But like a lot of people, when they think about computers and agents, they think about a nearly 30-year-old movie called The Matrix.
I see.
But I just bring that up to be kind of funny. But there is the sense of agency, of things going off and doing things on their own. And in this case, the agentic part means there's some defined steps that are going to go through before it kind of finishes, is what that means.
Yeah. So you will give, if you have an agent, you give it the goal. So the more recent models have this concept of reasoning, so they won't just go and start working on the task right away. They might work out plans and write it to a file and say, I'm going to do this first step, so I'm going to go off to the web and research what's meant by this. I'm going to go and look at the files and summarize what they say, and I'm going to pull this information together, and then I'm going to write a plan of what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to go back to the user and check the plans okay, and get their approval to do it, and then I'm going to go off and do my work and check my work and come back. So it's there's a lot more. Yeah, there's a lot more planning and feedback and feedback rather than something like you would get in ChatGPT when you're just asking a question and getting an answer.
So that's great. Thank you very much for helping. So now that we've built up maybe a bit of an understanding of what's going on under the hood, there are different hoods out there. The two of the ones that people may have heard about the most are Codex versus Claude. And so I was wondering if I know you addressed this in the book. So can you sort of give, for people who've heard of both and they're thinking of picking one or the other, what's the difference between Codex and Claude?
Okay. There's a couple aspects here. So one, you've got the model. So you've got the Claude models by Anthropic. We just had Opus 4.7 come out recently, and so models are constantly coming out. And then you have the Codex model by OpenAI. So you've got the models. Those I look at as like the engine for a car. And the engine, the engine needs a car to go in it, which is the harness around the model. So Codex CLI or Claude Code is our harnesses around the model. So So if you think of an engine, I know let's go. My old boss used to have this car. So TVR Chimera, which was a really good, a really fast sports car. And I also had a neighbor that had a Land Rover Defender. She was an archaeologist, and those two cars had exactly the same engine in it, a Rover V8 engine, but they're going to perform completely differently when you put them around a track, and that's what the engine and the harness are like. So you can just take the Claude model or the OpenAI model, but what you get out of it really depends about the harness. But Claude Code and Codex CLI are quite similar in that they are the combination of a harness and a model working together and trying to work optimally together to get the best out of the model. I think they're constantly being developed, but we're starting to see, I think, a sort of split in the direction. So something like Claude Code is, I think it's particularly good for early stages of software projects when you're building a website, you're building a POC. It's particularly strong there. When you want to be quite creative and be very iterative, it's particularly strong. For Codex, I think it's starting to get more into maintaining code you've already got. It can still do what code can do, but it's also seems to be focusing more on sort of background tasks. So refactoring code overnight, or automatically fixing problems, or understanding how a code base works before making changes. It's a bit more cautious. It's a bit more cautious in balance and losing out a bit on the creativity as a result. So it's probably slightly stronger for enterprises when you're working with existing code bases more often than building new code. But at the moment, there's not an awful lot of difference between them. But I think over the next year or so, I think you'll see more divergence.
Oh, that's interesting. You're in the position more divergence between them rather than kind of commodification and kind of everything becoming the same and interchangeable.
It's interesting because the sort of primitives which both tools are built on, things like, and going to in the book, things like skills, things like hooks, things like subagents. Those are all Claude Code, Codex CLI, Gemini CLI. They all have the same. They're all converging on the same sort of primitives, but that's not really a way of differentiating anymore. But I think the type of developers and the type of software development they do will be the they do best will be the thing that
I see
differentiates them.
Yeah,
but we will see. That's what I think will probably happen.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, I love partly the language that you're using as well, which shows like sort of a great deal of care and attention, but also kind of working with these things, which is I think one of the very interesting things about a change that's happened in the way a lot of people think about coding and managing code. Not too long ago, it was like you learn a programming language, and then you code in that programming language, and then you learn software architecture and you learn coding principles and stuff like that. There's this brand new thing of kind of working with these tools that you interact with, and you can get a flavor of them, and it's very interesting. It can come down to one thing our team will talk about is Claude's kind of, or Claude, I would say Claude, like I lived in Quebec for years. Claude is kind of dumb today, and there's this interesting variability that comes into working with these things where sometimes people will be like, what progress did you make on that today? And it's kind of like, well, I invented a rocket ship, or it sat there doing nothing. And so there's this very interesting element, or as you said about, one's more cautious than the other might be, one might be more creative than the other might be. But the experience of working with this is kind of like, I don't know, it's a bit even now, it's a bit discombobulating. And one thing you wrote about recently in a blog post was toxic flow.
Oh yes,
which I
yes.
immediately kind of identified with. And I was wondering if you recall that post, if you could talk a little bit about
Oh yes.
what you're getting at there.
Yeah, there's sort of different stages when you're using AI in software engineering. So you sort of started off like would call stage one, people using something like Copilot and writing a bit of code, um copying it into their IDE, or a bit later having autocomplete of your code within the IDE. So you're just creating bits of code, or code that got you 80-90% there. So you're just really using it as an assistant. Once you've got a agentic tool, whether it's something like Cursor or Windsurf or Codex or Code, you're working a lot more in partnership with the agent. You're going back and forth. You're saying, "Oh, can you write me a test? Can you write me a test for this? Okay, the test looks good. Now I'm going to write the code to pass that test." And you're working with it and going back and forth. But working you're working single threaded, if you like, and you're still you're still very involved in the code. You're looking at the code. You're part of the code. You're keeping ownership in the code, and that's sort of stage two, and you can have decent productivity improvement from that. If you go on a bit further, you get to stage three, which is sort of called agentic orchestration, if you like. So now, instead of working with the agent as like a colleague, you're now like a manager of multiple agents. So some people will go off and set that 6, 12 different agents doing different things with different specializations. I can't really cope with that, but I will do 3 or 4. I will have I might write a specification and write some tasks to do, and then set something like Codex CLI off, writing the code. While it's doing that, I'll be setting something else off to research something, or update the specification for the next piece or plan or test. So you might have 3 or 4 things going at once. And for me, I find that very, very difficult, because the cognitive load of keeping track of what everything is doing is really, really difficult. And it's like, imagine being like an air traffic controller. You can't lose sight of what's going on, because if you lose sight of what's going on and you get lazy and you approve something that's not safe, you can run into trouble. So you've got to constantly be on and watching everything, and that's very draining. And this is where the concept of toxic flow comes from. So in software development, before AI, you could get into a flow state. You could be really focused. You can be really focused and get carried away and lose track of time and feel really productive. And I find it a nice feeling. With this agentic orchestration, I can get into a flow state. I can lose time. I think a couple of weeks ago, I think I wrote in the article, I sat down to do some work, and it was about 3 o'clock out in the afternoon, and I was doing some work in a coffee shop, and I was just following all this. I was following this stuff and really, really concentrating, and I was making good progress. And then suddenly it was 8 o'clock, and I was being kicked out of the coffee shop, and I completely lost track in time. So I was in a flow state, but it didn't feel nice like the normal programming flow state. It just felt really, really draining. Really draining and a bit painful. And that's why I have this, the concept of toxic flow. It doesn't feel like a healthy flow. So I think that's something to sort of look out for. And I think when more developers start working in that way, it might start becoming a problem. So I can see us very quickly needing to get through that and get into the stage again where an agent does the orchestration of other agents for us, and we move up a level again. And that's more difficult, but that's with the the tools, the Codex CLI or Claude Code, you're starting to see the primitives for doing that. The ways for validating the code is correct, for running the sort of tools and following the sort of processes a senior developer would have, but getting the agents to do that instead. And it's going to be a lot of work to set that up, but I think we probably need to get there because, having everyone stuck in the toxic flow state is not going to be good.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for explaining that. It's I think a lot of people have been experienced their own version of that. I mean, for some people I've read about, and I've experienced this a bit myself. It's kind of like I've got nine clods up, and it's kind of like, oh, I haven't used 8 in an hour. I haven't looked at that, and I like, if I were only more efficient at moving between these things, wouldn't I be more productive?
Yes.
And then like people are like, oh, now I've got to go to sleep. I better make sure that I set the tasks so that it's working all night long.
Yes.
And there's something about it where it's kind of like, I think that there's like kind of people are going to be thrown back onto kind of what are we really doing here kind of questions once this moment kind of passes. And it's like, a classic mistake that programmers would complain that managers would make is measuring them by how many lines of code they wrote. And it's like, why is that a problem? Well, because what's the code actually being designed to do, right? Like, what?
Yes.
How should and then how should it be written most effectively? And it could be that like the hardest work and the most productive work that programmer does all day is go, rather for an hour, rather than typing out more lines of code.
That's right. I think I always thought that the best thing you can do as a software developer is be happy about throwing code that you don't need away.
Right.
You've got to be comfortable with throwing 95% of the code you write away and rationalizing it, because having a lot of code, and these tools are very good at producing a lot of code, is a liability, because you've got to maintain it. You've got to maintain all this code. So you want to try to keep it down and to rationalize it. And you need discipline. You need discipline to do that. You can't just let the agents run away and
Exactly.
and go mad. You've got to always bringing them back in. Yeah.
And as you talk about I love again, like talking about the feeling was bad after doing it. And this is actually an important thing in terms of long-term productivity that we need to keep in mind. One thing like I've found is that I like to ideally work on 2 complex things at a time so that I can manage it, so that I can use one clod and like get to a point where it's going to go off for 20 minutes. And then I can go to the other one and switch back and forth. I found that whereas, but like if I'm going to be like fixing bugs, for example, well, then I can have all 9 going, and it's kind of like, fix this bug, fix that bug, fix this bug, fix that bug. But that's the kind of thing where easily understandable, discrete things that you switch back and forth between without having to think is one way of doing. Anyway, I'm just bringing that up as an anecdote of like, we're all kind of facing how am I going to work with this? How's it going to make me feel? Am I working on the right thing? Oh no. And that leads me to ask, I guess, just in the sake of maybe getting a viral clip or something. But do you, I mean, I know I. Do you think that the job of programmer is going to go away?
I think it's going to go away. No, I don't think it's going to go away. It's going to change. I think it's going to change a lot. Essentially now, you I think mentally you have to make the shift from saying what's valuable is not being able to write the code anymore. That's what's coming down. The price of actually writing the code has come right down. It's coming down towards zero. It's not the code is not valuable. What you're doing now is you're building the system to write the code correctly. So instead of making the thing, you're making the factory to make the thing. You're shifting up a level. And to be able to do that, you need to know what good looks like in everything you do. So for the application, because it's possible for one person to do, a decent full stack application, do the deployment and everything now. But you need to know what good looks like in every area. So you need to know about architecture. You need to know front end, back end, security, compliance, how to deploy it, how to run it in production, how to set up your observability, how to test it, so you need to know, again, going back to the beginning, everything you learn in a computer science degree, but and then be able to apply it. So I think what the job will become a lot broader. People will need either a very broad skill set, so they at least know what looks good, what is good at every part of the stack, or you'll need people who are very deep experts who can go further than the AI tools can into a particular area. And that's going to be important to things like security or really good UX designer stuff.
Yeah.
The bar is going to be raised for those areas, because in a lot of places the AI tools will be good enough, as long as you know what good enough is.
That's a really great answer. Just moving on then to the last part of the interview where we talk about your experience writing. I'm just curious. You've written a couple of books before. This one is currently 600 pages long or so. I'm looking at the PDF. So before we talk about what you're doing going forward, I just wanted to ask you what your process was for writing this book. Are you the kind of like, I block off my Saturdays? Are you the kind of person who's I block off my mornings? Are you a kind of whenever I'm at the coffee shop or on the train kind of writer? Do you have a preferred process?
Okay. Yes, strictly speaking, when I'm writing, I can only write in coffee shops.
Okay.
I can't work at a desk. I find it really difficult. For this book though, it was a bit different. So I've done a couple of books before. I think each of them took about 9 months each. Probably 6 months to get to the first draft, and then 3 months of edits and getting ready from the production process. So having the technical reviewers go through it, having the people talk about the layout and the copy editing and stuff like that, and responding to all that. And it's a long process. But the trouble with that is if you start a book and it's not going to come out for a year, probably getting to press, that's going to be absolutely hopeless for a tool like Codex, because it will be out of date in a month, let alone in a year. So what I wanted to do as an experiment was say, right, how can I do a book that's updated every day? So again, like with the code, I didn't want to be writing all the book myself. I didn't want to constantly be researching and updating the book. So what I looked is if I could use Codex itself to build a factory that would enable me to write the book. So and that's what it does. So the book is nearly all written by Codex, with my review and with my direction on what topics to cover. It's automatically updated every day. So it's got Codex, which is running agentically automatically. It's keeping track of the source code for Codex, the release notes, the documentation on OpenAI, what people are talking about on Reddit, what people have published on videos on YouTube, and it checks that it's up. It checks that it's up to date and says, "Oh, there's this new feature that's come out, or this new paper that's come out. How does that affect the book? Do I need to make changes to the book?" And every day it sends me a plan for updating the book, which I review and then tell it what to update, and it updates the book, and then I review it, and then on Leanpub I can just republish the book every day and keep it up to date.
That is fascinating. I have not heard of an author doing that quite that. So, where is the change log for this? I know there's a reference to it being or an explanation about it in chapter 2.
Yeah, there is a change. There is a change log for the book. So it's been treated as a piece of software. So it is, it lives in Git. It's version controlled. It has versioning on it.
Okay.
And there is a change log incorporated in the book saying, "Oh, this is what's changed between each version." One of my friends suggested what would be really useful is if you could have more personalization than that. For example, okay, I read the book a month ago. I now picked it up again. What's changed? What chapter should I reread? What are the big changes since I personally last read it? Not generally what the book has changed in general.
Right.
So I haven't done that yet, but I think that's a really good idea.
That is a really excellent idea. I'm going to think about something maybe we can do on our end, because that's exactly the kind of thing that we love to think about doing. It's so interesting, the idea, the power of being able to make something that's like, since I last read it, what's changed? Not just between, because the classic thing for a Leanpub book is like, what's changed? I've just published a new version of my book. What's changed? Well, I made some edits to chapter 1 and I added chapter 5. But that's since I last published a public version of my book, not since the person was last there reading it. And that's a very interesting idea. I'm gonna think about that one. So the last question I always like to ask on the podcast, if the guest is using Leanpub and is a Leanpub author, is if there was one magical feature we could build, other than the one we just discussed, if there was one magical feature we could build for you, or if there's had one thing that just you shaking your fist, damn you Leanpub, why does this suck so bad? If there was one thing like that we could fix for you, can you think of anything that you would ask us to do?
Let me think. I don't know. I think I would like, for this particular book, the way writing it. I would like sort of support for publishing locally, for creating a local version of the book. You'll probably tell me you have this feature now, but give me a local version of the book, because I would like the agent to be able to go and review the book. So, for example, the book's got a lot of tables in it, and sometimes there's overflow in the
Right.
tables, and I was able to fix that quite well by I could download the PDF of the book, and then I could give it to another agent, in this case a Gemini model that's good at visually looking at a book, and it could act as like a proofreader and say, oh, on page 35 there's some overflow, and produce the report, and then I can give it back to Codex, give it back that report, and then it will go off. Oh yeah, I need to adjust this, so I can abbreviate the words, put in the hyphen here, or change the size of the column to fix that. I would love for that, if I could get it to generate now those PDFs as it would be on the Leanpub site locally, then it could automate that process. That would be quite interesting.
Okay.
I'm trying to replicate. Yeah, what I've been trying to do with the Codex agent is replicate the process that I went through when writing previous books. So I will have a technical reviewer. I will have an agent that will take the mermaid diagrams that Codex will generate for the book, and it will redraw those as a proper illustration using a Gemini image model and replace those in the book. So there's lots of so I was trying to think about the process you go through the book publishing, that difficult bit after you've done your first draft and you need to do all the editing and the typesetting and stuff like that. And Leanpub makes that quite easy. But yeah, if you had that ability to do it locally, it would, you can automate that even more.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much for sharing that. That's a really excellent suggestion. We're working on not necessarily generating something locally, but we're working on doing something along those lines on our own now, and specifically inspired by exactly what you're saying, which is like, from people who've actually gone through the conventional publishing pipeline, which, there's lots of things to complain about, but it exists for lots of really good reasons as well. And so that's something we're working very hard on. So thanks very much for that. The book is Codex CLI, Agentic Engineering from First Principles by Daniel Vaughan. It's really good. I recommend it to anyone, and especially people who want to keep up to date with things that are changing. So Dan, thank you very much for being on the Leanpub podcast.